It is not hard to say people who commit acts of terror in this country should not only be punished, but God forbid they should have any rights.
I was so glad to see that the ladies of The View are back this week, back on their bullshit. So let's go through this clip here on The View talking about voting rights. Now, really, when I say back on their bullshit, I'm really just talking about Abby Huntsman and Meghan McCain. But let's watch their thoughts on having allowing felons the right to vote.
If somebody commits a serious crime, sexual assault, murder, they're going to be punished. They may be in jail for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, their whole lives. That's what happens when you commit a serious crime. But I think the right to vote is inherent to our democracy. Yes, even for terrible people.
You're writing an opposition ad against you by saying you think the Boston Marathon bomber should vote not after he pays his debt to society, but while he's in jail. You sure about that?
I do believe. Look, this is what I believe.
If you're going to go picking and choosing who should get to vote while you're in jail, I don't see that's a practical thing to do. Oh, you did this, and no, you didn't do that, so you get to vote. No, you can and you can't. Either you have to let everybody do it or nobody.
But I think the idea of voting while you're in prison, that is a very slippery slope. I mean, people are in there for all kinds of things, and you commit a crime, you shouldn't be able to vote in prison.
It's really a constitutional question, because what the Constitution says under the 14th Amendment is that it's a state issue. It's a state-by-state issue. And in fact, I think Bernie's probably speaking to his experience, because in Vermont, people in prison are allowed to vote. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And in about 48 states up until 2017, in Maine, and in 48 states, most people, even after they got out of prison, were not allowed to vote.
Right. And I will say, talking about prison reform and talking about low-level crimes like Alice Marie Johnson getting let out of prison, I believe a woman like that should have the right to vote for all intents and purposes. But for Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris to go on TV and say that the Boston terrorist deserves any rights in this country after killing 3 people and injuring 264 in 2013, I think is disgraceful. RNC turned that into an ad. It is not hard to say people who commit acts of terror in this country should not only be punished, but God forbid they should have any rights that any of us had, or someone who commits a low-level crime like smoking pot or getting caught with a dime bag of pot and going to jail. It is not hard to put lines between terrorists and people who commit low-level crimes.
Actually, Megan, it is. And that's the problem. So let me break this down. Now, Sunny Hostin, I think, had a good position here. Joy Behar also seems to understand the issue here. And that's, you can't pick and choose who gets to vote and who can't in prison. Because when you start that process, as Sunny Hostin alluded to, in 48 states, in the 48 states that don't allow you to vote from prison, those are also the same 48 states that have pushed, that have disenfranchised people even after they have served their time. So this is the problem here. This is why you make it a right, so that there isn't even the potential of, for example, pushing out black voters or pushing out voters that have committed crimes in the past, or disenfranchising people in various ways that they do again and again and again, as we've seen it. They don't have the ability to do that if you have voting as a right. Now, I have a lot of data here, a lot of different perspectives to share here, because I think this is an important issue to really educate people on, because this is something that people tend to be reactionary towards. You think, oh, yeah, terrorists shouldn't be allowed to vote. But if you actually understand the process and how the Republican Party have disenfranchised people and how they've used that kind of reactionary tone, or that reactionary response to then further disenfranchise other people to vote. I mean, you have to understand the process and what is actually going on here. So first, let me just share with you that other democracies do allow people in prison to vote. So, for example, Canada. So a 2002 Supreme Court of Canada judgment gave federal prisoners the right to vote on constitutional grounds, ruling 5-4 that voting is a fundamental right in a democracy. Now, let's look at the so first of all, yeah, this is not like a huge thing. This is just should be obvious. Voting should be a right in democracies. Now, let me just share here the consequences of limiting the right to vote to anyone. So this from Splinter. For every convicted bomber who'd be granted the right to vote, there's 100,000 people who became felons due to non-violent drug offenses who'd be re-enfranchised. Also, relying on a justice system that systematically protects the powerful in society who only rarely answer for their own crimes to sort out who should vote in America is dangerous and stupid. Sanders is right. The right to vote shouldn't be taken away for bad behavior, and that includes Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. And considering this country's racist history of both administering justice and taking away the right to vote for bullshit reasons, no one should trust the state to be a fair arbiter of who gets to vote. And this speaks to Sonny Hostin's point and Joy Behar's point of you can't pick and choose, because when you start that process, you just disenfranchise more and more and more and more people. Now, the ACLU is also on Bernie's side here. So they tweeted out, fact, laws that disenfranchise people in jails and prison disproportionately impact people of color. Denying the right to vote to an entire class of citizens undermines our democracy. And that's what I spoke to earlier. So this is part of the issue with why black voters are disenfranchised most in America, because they use these sorts of laws to disenfranchise more people. Now, to give you an example of so this video speaks to that exact issue. So let me just first share this tweet that shared the video. So this is from Frederick Joseph. This video will likely become a meme, but it's deeper than that. The reaction of the black woman in the top right when Pete Buttigieg says felons shouldn't have the right to vote is vastly different than most of the white people around her. So let me share that video.
Should they be able to vote?
While incarcerated?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Now, in case you missed that, let me slow it down and zoom in to what exactly happened here. Yeah. So basically, one of the only black women they actually let into that debate, or one of the only black students there, understood how absurd it was that this entire crowd of Harvard students were clapping to disenfranchise people, because she actually understands the issue. Now, let me share with you the real-life effect of what happens when you allow felons to vote. So here's one example. This is from NBC News. Joseph Jackson was one of the millions of Americans inspired by Barack Obama's 2008 White House bid. A black man in the nation's whitest state, he coordinated voter registration drives and cast his first ever ballot for the candidate who would become the nation's first African-American president. And he did it all while incarcerated in a maximum security prison, serving 19 years for manslaughter. That's because Jackson, 52, was convicted in Maine, one of just 2 states that allow felons to vote from behind bars. In the U.S., nearly all convicted felons are disenfranchised during their prison sentences and often barred from the ballot for years after release. Sometimes offenders lose the right to vote for life. For Jackson, getting involved in politics behind bars, petitioning lawmakers on prison reform, founding a chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and casting the first ballot put him on a path for life after prison. Released in 2013, he earned a master's degree and works on behalf of inmates and their families with the Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition. So, this is the potential benefit of allowing prisoners to vote. You include them in democracy, they still feel like they are part of society, and they have room to rehabilitate themselves and have a life outside once they serve their time and leave prison. Now, what is the opposite effect? So, like, what's the actual negative effect of allowing prisoners to vote? Are they going to all get together and vote for, the one candidate that wants to release them all from prison? Like, what is the actual real world effect? So I saw this tweet from David Pakman, and I think it sheds light on that. The entire voting while in prison, quote unquote, controversy is laughable. If your fear is seriously that if prisoners get to vote, they might have enough numbers to vote for someone that'll let them out of prison, then your reaction should be, we have way too many prisoners. Exactly. So there is no worry here. Allowing prisoners to vote, what is the negative consequence? And the idea that, I was going to rob that bank, but you know what? I'm going to lose my right to vote, so I'm not going to rob that bank now. I mean, people have this incredibly cartoonish view of the world and of people and why people do bad things. Oftentimes, it's because they are born into a shitty life. They're born into a family that maybe they have abusive parents. Maybe they don't have much opportunity and they get into a life of crime. And oftentimes, it's not necessarily their fault that they ended up where they are. But once they are there and able to rehabilitate themselves, learn more about the process, maybe voting piques their interest in something, that's how you change, that's how you improve these people who have, who one point in their life were down an incredibly dangerous and destructive path. Now also, when you focus too much on punishment like the US system does, has it improved things? It hasn't. Focusing on punitive measures does not improve society. So this from Psychology Today. Why punishment doesn't reduce crime. Evidence demonstrates why punishment does not change criminal offending. So what is our return on investment? What have we achieved with all our nearly unilateral focus on punishment? There are several ways of looking at it, but perhaps the most direct is recidivism or reoffending. The overall recidivism rate is about 70%. Meaning 70% of offenders are rearrested within 5 years of being released from the criminal justice system. It is important to note that recidivism is a conservative measure since it only counts those who have been caught. So, the focus on punitive measures instead of rehabilitation has not changed things. It's made things worse. So, again, there has to be a real mind shift in terms of how you think about these issues, because the way that it's been going has not worked. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and just think about this politically. Politically speaking, how does this benefit Bernie Sanders? It doesn't. I mean, as Chris Cuomo laid out, this is a very easy attack ad for a conservative to make. But that goes to show you that Bernie's intention here, the reason he's running, is not because he feels like it's not because of his ego. It's not because he wants to be the most popular guy. It's because he has actual principles. He has an actual fight that he is willing to fight for and really deliver a message to help people. I mean, the idea that Bernie's supporting this policy because it's going to make him more popular? No. I mean, a position like this that will be used to attack him shows you that he is a genuine person. So this tweet from Zephyr Teachout. Bernie Sanders is incredibly brave for opposing all felon disenfranchisement, including in prison. It is absolutely the right position to take. Felon disenfranchisement is a product of the Black Codes, and Black Codes refers to laws that were designed to limit the freedom of African Americans. Also, 2 states, Vermont and Maine, and several countries allow all to vote. I doubt it is popular. He doesn't need this position for votes. This is about principle and leadership and opening himself up to incredible attacks. Think of all the secondary effects too. Children of imprisoned parents can talk about elections, replacing shame around voting. So this is about setting a standard, making the right to vote a right in a democracy. This is not going to be politically generous, or this is not going to help Bernie in any way politically in terms of how the media takes it clearly. But what it does is it sets a standard. And at the same time, it shows you that Bernie Sanders is a genuine person who actually cares about helping people.